She came to heal others. But the walls still whispered their pain. A door sealed by time and silence. And a truth that could heal her too. If you found a place that knew your wounds before you spoke them, would you open the door? The orphanage stood at the edge of Willowmere like a relic from another century. Its stone walls half swallowed by ivy, its windows dark and silent as closed eyes. Mara Lennox stood in front of it, her hands shoved deep into the pockets of her jacket, and tried to remember why she'd thought this was a good idea. The afternoon light was fading, casting long shadows across the overgrown lawn, and the building seemed to absorb the dimness rather than reflect it. It looked tired. Mara understood tired. She'd been on medical leave for 6 months. 6 months since the night she'd watched a 7-year-old girl named Sophie slip away in a hospital bed, her small hand going cold in Mara's despite every drug, every prayer, every desperate attempt to hold death at bay. Sophie had been her patient for 2 years, and Mara had loved her fiercely, recklessly, the way nurses aren't supposed to love. When Sophie died, something inside Mara broke. Not cleanly, like a bone that could be set, but quietly, like glass cracking under pressure, splintering into pieces too small to put back together. Her hands still shook when she tried to sleep. Her dreams were still filled with the sound of a flatlining monitor. The realtor, a cheerful woman in her 50s named Linda, appeared beside her with a ring of keys that jangled like bells. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Linda said, though her tone suggested she didn't quite believe it. Mara didn't answer. Beautiful wasn't the word. The orphanage was something else, something she couldn't name yet. Linda unlocked the heavy front door, and it groaned open, releasing a breath of stale air that smelled of dust and old wood and something faintly medicinal, like antiseptic that had faded over decades but never quite disappeared. "Place closed in 1974, Linda said, stepping inside. Last caretaker was a Dr. Iris Hale. Lovely woman, from what I've heard. Took in children no one else wanted, sick kids, traumatized kids. Most of them got better, which was unusual back then. Then one day, she just vanished, left everything behind." Mara followed her into the entrance hall, her footsteps echoing on the worn marble floor. Vanished? Linda shrugged. No one knows. Some say she moved to Europe. Others say she's buried somewhere on the property. Small town gossip, you know. She smiled apologetically. Anyway, it's yours now if you want it. Honestly, you're the first person in years who's even looked at it. Mara walked deeper into the hall, her eyes adjusting to the dim light. The space was vast, lined with wooden doors that stood slightly ajar, as if waiting for someone to return. Dust motes floated in the slanted beams of afternoon sun, slow and aimless, like time itself had forgotten to move forward here. "I'll take it," Mara said quietly. Linda blinked. "You don't want to see the rest?" "No, I'll take it." Linda hesitated, studying Mara with the kind of careful look people gave to those who might be making a mistake they'd regret. But she didn't argue. She handed Mara the keys, reminded her to call if she needed anything, and left. And then Mara was alone. She moved through the building slowly, methodically, opening doors one by one. Most of the rooms were small, each one furnished with a narrow bed, a wooden dresser, and a single window. The furniture was covered in white sheets, ghostly and still, as if the place had been frozen mid-breath. In one room, Mara found a child's drawing tacked to the wall, faded with age, but still visible. It showed a house beneath a bright yellow sun, and beside it, a figure in a white coat holding the hand of a small child. The words "Thank you, Dr. Hale" were scrawled at the bottom in careful, uneven letters. Mara touched the edge of the paper, her throat tightening. How many children had lived here? How many had been healed? And why had it all been left behind? She continued down the hallway, her fingers trailing along the walls, until she reached the main hall at the center of the building. It was larger than the others, with high ceilings and tall windows that let in the last of the daylight. And on the far wall, hanging slightly crooked, was a framed photograph. Mara crossed the room and stood in front of it, her breath catching. The photo was old, black and white, edges yellowed with time. It showed a group of children, maybe a dozen of them, standing in front of the orphanage, smiling, alive, their faces bright with something Mara couldn't quite name. Hope, maybe, or joy. In the background, barely visible, was a woman in a white coat. Her face was blurred, as if she'd moved just as the shutter clicked, but her posture was clear, tall, steady, her hand resting gently on the shoulder of a small boy. Mara leaned closer, her pulse quickening. The woman's build, her stance, the way she held herself, it looked exactly like Mara. She stepped back, her breath shallow, her mind racing. It couldn't be. It was just a trick of the light, a coincidence, a shadow playing games with her tired eyes. But as she stared at the photograph, she couldn't shake the feeling that the woman in the white coat was looking back at her. Waiting. Mara turned away, her hands trembling again, and forced herself to breathe. She was exhausted. Grief did strange things to the mind. That was all this was. But as she walked toward the staircase, something else caught her eye. A door, tucked into an alcove beneath the stairs, half hidden in shadow. It was different from the others, heavier, darker, with a rusted padlock hanging from the handle. Mara approached it slowly, her footsteps echoing in the empty hall. She reached out and touched the wood, and the moment her fingers made contact, a strange sensation washed over her. Not fear. Not quite. Something closer to recognition, as if the door had been waiting for her all along. Mara returned the next morning with cleaning supplies, work gloves, and a thermos of coffee she wouldn't finish. The orphanage looked different in daylight, less haunted, more forgotten. Sunlight filtered through the dirty windows, casting pale gold squares across the dusty floors, and for the first time in months, Mara felt something other than exhaustion. She felt purpose. She started with the main hall, sweeping debris into piles, wiping down windowsills, peeling back the white sheets that covered the furniture like burial shrouds. Beneath them, she found chairs with carved wooden backs, tables with legs shaped like lion's paws, and a piano in the corner, its keys yellowed but still intact. Mara pressed one gently, and a single note rang out clear, resonant, impossibly alive. The sound echoed through the empty building, and for a moment, Mara swore she heard laughter. She froze, listening. But there was only silence. By noon, a truck pulled up outside, and a man in his 50s climbed out, carrying a toolbox and a thermos of his own. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with graying hair and the kind of weathered face that came from years of working outdoors. "You must be Mara," he said, extending a hand. "I'm Sam. Linda asked me to stop by, see if you needed help with the repairs." Mara shook his hand, grateful for the company. "Thanks. I wasn't sure where to start." Sam looked around the hall, his expression thoughtful. "Place hasn't changed much, still feels the same." "You've been here before?" He nodded. "I grew up here. Lived here for 3 years when I was a kid." Mara blinked. "You were one of the children?" "Yeah." Sam set down his toolbox and ran a hand along the banister of the staircase, his touch almost reverent. "Dr. Hale took me in after my parents died in a fire. I was 8. Didn't speak for 3 years after that. Doctors said it was trauma, that I might never talk again. But you did." Sam smiled faintly. "Dr. Hale didn't give up on me. She didn't use medicine, not the kind you'd expect. She just listened, sat with me, played music. Let me be quiet until I was ready to speak again. He paused. Sounds strange, I know. Mara thought of Sophie, of the hours she'd spent at her bedside, reading to her, holding her hand, doing everything medicine couldn't. No, she said quietly. It doesn't sound strange at all. They worked together through the afternoon, clearing rooms one by one. In a small bedroom on the second floor, Mara found a music box tucked into a drawer. She wound the key, and a delicate lullaby began to play, tinny and fragile, as if it might break at any moment. Sam paused in the doorway, listening. That was Emily's. She loved that thing. Played it every night before bed. What happened to her? She got better. Most of us did. Sam's voice was soft, distant. Dr. Hale had a way of making you believe you could heal, even when everyone else had given up on you. Mara set the music box down carefully. Where is she now? Dr. Hale? Sam shook his head. No one knows. She disappeared the night before the orphanage closed. Just walked out and never came back. Some people think she left town. Others think something happened to her. He looked at Mara, his expression unreadable. But I think she knew her work here was done. As the sun began to set, Mara found herself in the kitchen, a large room with high ceilings and a massive stone fireplace. The walls were lined with shelves, most of them empty, but a few still held jars of preserves, their contents long since spoiled. Mara pulled one down, wiping the dust from the label. Blackberry jam. Summer 1972. She smiled despite herself. Then she noticed something odd. One of the shelves was crooked, jutting out slightly from the wall. Mara tugged on it, and it swung open like a door, revealing a narrow passageway behind. Her breath caught. Sam appeared beside her, his face pale. What is it? Mara asked. The basement, he said quietly. Dr. Hale's office. Mara peered into the darkness beyond the shelf, where a narrow staircase descended into shadow. At the bottom, barely visible, was a door. Padlocked. Why is it locked? Mara asked. Sam hesitated. No one was allowed down there, not even us kids. Dr. Hale said some doors were meant to stay closed. Mara stared at the staircase, her pulse quickening. Why? Sam didn't answer. He just turned and walked away, leaving Mara alone in the kitchen, staring into the dark. That night, Mara lay awake in the small room she'd claimed as her own, listening to the wind rattle the windows. She couldn't stop thinking about the basement, about Dr. Hale, about the children who'd healed here, and the woman who'd made it possible, and about the locked door that seemed to whisper her name. Mara couldn't stop thinking about the basement. It haunted her during the day, while she scrubbed floors and replaced broken windows, and it followed her into sleep, whispering at the edges of her dreams. On the third night, she gave in. She sat cross-legged in front of the hidden passageway, a pair of bolt cutters resting in her lap, and stared at the padlock glinting faintly in the beam of her flashlight. Sam's words echoed in her mind. Some doors are meant to stay closed. But Mara had spent 6 months running from closed doors, from grief, from guilt, from the weight of a child's hand going cold in hers. She was done running. The bolt cutters snapped through the rusted metal with a crack that echoed through the empty kitchen. The padlock fell to the floor with a dull thud, and Mara pushed the door open. Cold air rushed up from the darkness below, carrying the scent of dust and old paper and something faintly medicinal like dried herbs mixed with chalk. Mara descended slowly, her flashlight beam cutting through the blackness, her footsteps creaking on the narrow wooden stairs. The basement opened into a long, narrow room with low ceilings and stone walls. It was colder down here, the kind of cold that seemed to seep into your bones, but it didn't feel sinister. It felt sacred. The room was filled with shelves floor to ceiling, lining every wall packed with books, files, and glass jars filled with dried flowers and herbs. A wooden desk sat in the center, covered in a thin layer of dust, a single leather-bound journal resting on top of it like an offering. Mara moved deeper into the room, her flashlight sweeping across the walls. There were drawings tacked to the stone children's drawings, faded with age but still visible. Houses with smoke curling from chimneys. Families holding hands beneath bright yellow suns. And at the bottom of each one, in careful, uneven letters, "Thank you, Dr. Hale." Mara's throat tightened. This wasn't just an office. It was a sanctuary. She approached the desk and opened the first drawer. Inside were files, dozens of them, each one labeled with a child's name and date. Mara pulled one out at random and opened it. Michael R., age 7. Diagnosis: selective mutism following parental abandonment. But beneath the clinical language, Dr. Hale had written something else. Michael does not need medication. He needs to be heard. Treatment: daily piano lessons. Let him speak through music until he is ready to speak through words. Mara turned the page. Day 14. Michael spoke his first word today. "Hello." He whispered it to the piano keys before he said it to me. Healing isn't chemical, it's connection. Mara's hands trembled as she set the file down and reached for another. Lily M., age 9. Diagnosis: severe anxiety and night terrors. Lily does not need sedatives. She needs stories. Treatment: nightly readings of fairy tales. Let her learn that even in the darkest stories, there is always light. Mara read file after file, each one documenting a child's trauma and Dr. Hale's unconventional response. No drugs, no surgeries, just presence, music, art, stories. Love. Mara sank into the chair at the desk, her chest tight, tears slipping down her cheeks. This was the kind of healing she'd always believed in, the kind she'd tried to practice with Sophie, reading to her, holding her hand, refusing to let her feel alone even when the medicine failed. But the hospital had called it unscientific. The other nurses had called it attachment. And when Sophie died, Mara had believed them. She'd believed she'd been wrong to love her patients so fiercely, but Dr. Hale had proven otherwise. She'd saved children by refusing to see them as cases, by treating them as whole, wounded, beautiful human beings. And somehow, in this cold, forgotten basement, Mara felt less alone than she had in months. She reached for the leather-bound journal on the desk, its cover embossed with the initials I, H. Iris Hale. Mara opened it carefully, the spine cracking softly, and turned to the first page. The handwriting was elegant, steady, written in black ink that had barely faded. "This journal is for the one who comes after me." Mara's breath caught. "If you are reading this, you have found your way here because you, too, are broken. Do not be afraid. Healing begins when we stop running from the wounds." Mara stared at the words, her hands trembling. How could Dr. Hale have known? How could she have written this for someone she'd never met? Mara turned the page, her heart pounding. The next entry was dated 1971. "I have spent my life trying to heal others, but I am only now beginning to understand that healing is not about erasing pain. It is about learning to carry it with grace. The children who come here are not broken. They are simply unfinished stories, waiting for someone to believe they are worth continuing." Mara's vision blurred with tears. She turned another page and froze. The entry was dated the 12th of June, 1973. "Today, a child was born in the town hospital. I do not know why I felt compelled to go, but I did. When I held her, I felt something I cannot explain. as if I were looking at my own future, or perhaps my past. I wrote her name in this journal so I would never forget. Mara Lennox. Mara's hands went numb. The journal slipped from her fingers and fell to the desk with a soft thud. Her name, written decades before she was born. Written by a woman who had vanished before Mara ever stepped foot in this place. Mara stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the stone floor, her breath coming in short, shallow gasps. "How is that possible?" she whispered, her voice trembling. The basement was silent, but the words on the page remained undeniable and impossible. Mara Lennox. Mara sat on the cold stone floor of the basement, the journal open in her lap, her flashlight casting long shadows across the walls. She'd been there for hours. The light from the small window above had shifted from pale gray to deep amber as the sun set, but Mara hadn't moved. She couldn't. Her name was on the page, written in elegant script, dated decades before she was born. Mara Lennox. She read the entry again, her hands trembling. The 12th of June, 1973. A child was born in the town hospital today. I went to see her, though I don't know why I felt compelled. When I held her, I felt something I cannot explain, as if I were looking at my own future, or perhaps my past. She has dark eyes, curious and bright, and when she looked at me, I swear she saw something in me no one else has ever seen. I wrote her name in this journal so I would never forget. Mara Lennox. Mara's breath came in shallow gasps. She checked the date again. The 12th of June, 1973. Her birthday. Her exact birthday. She turned the page, her pulse racing. The next entry was dated 2 years later. The 4th of August, 1975. I saw the child again today, Mara. Her mother brought her to the general store. She was quiet, watchful, the kind of child who notices everything. I wanted to speak to her, but I didn't. How could I explain what I felt? That this child, barely 2 years old, seemed to carry something I had been searching for my entire life? Mara's hands shook as she turned another page. The 10th of November, 1982. Mara is 9 now. I saw her at the school playground, reading a book beneath a tree while the other children played. She reminds me of myself at that age alone, but not lonely, searching for meaning in a world that feels too loud. I wonder if she will become a healer, as I did. I wonder if she will carry the same wounds. Mara's vision blurred with tears. How is this possible? Dr. Hale had been watching her. Not in a sinister way, but in the way someone watches a seedling, hoping it will grow. Mara flipped ahead, her fingers trembling, until she found an entry dated years later. The 17th of May, 1995. Mara graduated from nursing school today. I saw the announcement in the local paper. She wants to work in pediatrics. Of course she does. She has always been drawn to the broken things, the lost things, the things that need saving. I see myself in her more clearly now than ever before. I only hope she will find what I could not piece with the ones she cannot save. Mara dropped the journal, her breath hitching in her throat. Dr. Hale had known. She'd known everything. Her childhood, her career, her calling. And somehow, she'd written about it all before it happened. Mara stood abruptly, pacing the narrow room, her mind spinning. This wasn't possible. It couldn't be. But the dates were there. The details too precise to be coincidence. Her mother's name, Catherine. Her hometown, Willowmere. Her decision to become a nurse. All of it recorded in Dr. Hale's elegant handwriting, as if she'd been documenting Mara's life from across time. Mara stopped pacing and pressed her palms against the cold stone wall, trying to steady herself. "What is this?" she whispered. The basement was silent, but the journal on the floor seemed to hum with answers she wasn't ready to hear. She returned to the desk and opened the drawers, searching for something, anything that might explain the impossible. In the bottom drawer, she found a stack of photographs, yellowed with age. Children's faces stared back at her, smiling, alive, their eyes bright with hope. And in every photograph, standing just behind them, was Dr. Hale. Mara studied the woman's face, strong, kind, weary in a way that only someone who'd carried too much could understand. She looked exactly like the woman in the framed photograph upstairs. Mara set the photos down and pulled out the last item in the drawer, a sealed envelope addressed in Dr. Hale's handwriting. To the one who will continue my work. Mara's breath caught. She opened it carefully, her hands trembling, and unfolded the letter inside. The handwriting was the same, but the tone was different, softer, more intimate, as if Dr. Hale were speaking directly to her. If you are reading this, then you have found your way here, as I knew you would. Do not be afraid of what you have discovered. You and I are not so different. We are healers who carry the weight of every life we could not save. We are women who love too fiercely, who give too much, who break under the weight of our own compassion. I have spent my life trying to heal others, but I am only now beginning to understand that healing is not about saving everyone. It is about showing up, again and again, even when it breaks us. It is about loving without guarantee, caring without reward, staying when it would be easier to leave. You have come here because you are searching for redemption. You want to save the children you could not save before. But the truth is this: you do not need redemption. You need forgiveness from yourself, for yourself. This place was never just an orphanage. It was a sanctuary for the broken. And you, my dear, are its true keeper. Mara's tears fell onto the page, blurring the ink. She folded the letter carefully and set it on the desk, her chest tight with something she couldn't name. Grief, maybe. Or relief. She looked up and noticed, for the first time, a small portrait hanging crooked on the wall above the desk. It was Dr. Hale, younger, her hair dark, her eyes steady and calm. Mara stepped closer, studying the face. The shape of the jaw, the set of the shoulders, the way the eyes seemed to hold both sorrow and strength. It was like looking into a mirror across time. Mara whispered, her voice barely audible. I've been here before. And in the silence of the basement, surrounded by the ghosts of children who had healed and a woman who had loved them, Mara finally understood. She hadn't come here by accident. She'd been called. Mara couldn't leave the basement. She spent the next 3 days there, sleeping on the cold floor with a blanket pulled around her shoulders, waking to read more of Dr. Hale's journal by the light of a camping lantern. The world above the orphanage, the town, her own life felt distant and unreal. Down here, surrounded by the records of children who had healed and a woman who had loved them, Mara finally felt like she could breathe. She read the journal from beginning to end, then started over. Dr. Hale's entries spanned decades, chronicling her work with children society had given up on. The 3rd of April 1965. Thomas arrived today. Age 10. Diagnosis: severe PTSD following a house fire that killed his sister. He does not speak. He does not eat. He only stares at the wall. The hospital sent him here because they have run out of options. I will not give up on him. Treatment. Art therapy. Let him paint what he cannot say. The 12th of May, 1965. Thomas painted today. The canvas was black at first, nothing but darkness. But by the end, there was a small yellow sun in the corner. He pointed to it and whispered, "Hope." I wept. Mara's hands trembled as she turned the pages. The entries continued, each one documenting a child's trauma and Dr. Hale's unconventional response. music for memory restoration, gardening for depression, storytelling for grief, and beneath every entry, the same refrain. Healing isn't chemical, it's connection. But as Mara read deeper, the tone shifted. Dr. Hale's handwriting grew shakier, the entries shorter, more fragmented. The 14th of October, 1971. I lost a child today, Emma, age 6, leukemia. I held her hand until the end, but it wasn't enough. I keep asking myself, what did I miss? What could I have done differently? The other children are crying. They say they can still hear her laughter in the halls. I wish I could hear it too. Mara's breath caught. She knew that pain. The weight of a small hand going cold. The desperate, irrational belief that if you'd just tried harder, loved more, stayed longer, maybe they would have lived. She read on, her vision blurring with tears. The 2nd of November, 1971. I see myself in every child who arrives here, broken, unwanted, searching for a reason to stay. I wonder if I am healing them, or if they are healing me. I wonder if there is any difference. Mara pressed her palm against the page, as if she could reach through time and tell Dr. Hale that she understood, that she, too, had carried the weight of every life she couldn't save, that she, too, had wondered if healing others was just a way of hiding from her own wounds. She turned to the final pages, her heart pounding. The last entry was dated the 10th of May, 1974, 1 week before the orphanage closed. I am tired, so very tired. I have given everything to this place, to these children, and still it is not enough. There are always more who need saving, always more who slip through my fingers. I do not know how much longer I can carry this. Mara's throat tightened. The next entry was dated 3 days later. I spoke to the board today. They want to close the orphanage. They say my methods are unproven, that I am wasting resources on children who would be better served in institutions. They do not understand that love is not a waste, that connection is not frivolous, that some wounds cannot be healed with medicine alone. Mara wiped her eyes, her chest aching. And then, the final entry, the 17th of May, 1974. Tonight, I will leave this place. Not because I want to, but because I must. The board has made their decision, and I cannot fight them anymore. But before I go, I want to leave something behind, a record of what was done here, and why. For the one who will come after me. For the healer who will carry the same wounds I carried, and who will need to know that they are not alone. If you are reading this, Mara, you have already begun to heal. The children you will help here will not just be saved by you, they will save you. This place was never meant to be an orphanage. It was meant to be a sanctuary for the broken. And you, my dear, are its true caretaker. Mara dropped the journal, her hands shaking, tears streaming down her face. She looked around the basement, at the shelves lined with files, the drawings on the walls, the portrait of Dr. Hale watching over it all. "How did you know?" she whispered. The basement was silent. But the answer was already there, written in every entry, every file, every child's drawing. Dr. Hale had known because she had lived it. She had loved too much, given too much, broken under the weight of her own compassion. And she had left this place, this sanctuary, for someone who would understand. Mara stood and walked to the desk, where a single sheet of paper lay beneath the journal. It was a letter, unfinished, written in Dr. Hale's elegant handwriting. To whoever finds this place, continue what I started. Do not let the world tell you that compassion is weakness. Do not let them tell you that love is not enough, because it is. It always has been. The letter ended mid-sentence, the ink trailing off as if Dr. Hale had been interrupted, or as if she had been waiting for someone else to finish it. Mara picked up a pen from the desk, her hand trembling. She set it beside the paper, staring at the blank space below Dr. Hale's words. And then, slowly, she whispered, "Maybe this is what I was meant to heal." The lantern flickered, casting long shadows across the walls. And for the first time since Sophie's death, Mara felt something other than grief. She felt purpose. 6 months later, the orphanage looked like it had woken from a long sleep. The windows gleamed. The ivy had been trimmed back to reveal the stone beneath, and the rooms that had been shrouded in dust now held beds with clean linens, desks with art supplies, and shelves lined with books. Mara had worked tirelessly, guided by Dr. Hale's journal and her own quiet certainty that this place was meant to be more than a building. It was meant to be a sanctuary. Her first resident arrived on a cold November morning. Lily was 9 years old, pale and fragile, recovering from a near-fatal illness that had left her weak and withdrawn. The hospital had discharged her with a list of medications and instructions, but no one had asked what Lily needed beyond pills and checkups. Mara knew better. She'd learned from Dr. Hale that healing wasn't just about treating symptoms. It was about treating the soul. Lily didn't speak much at first. She sat in the sunlit room Mara had prepared for her, staring out the window at the garden where weeds were slowly being replaced by wildflowers. Mara didn't push. She brought Lily watercolors and paper, left a music box on the nightstand, and read to her every evening stories about children who survived impossible things, who found light in the darkest places. And slowly, like ice melting in spring, Lily began to thaw. One afternoon, Mara found Lily in the common room, painting. The canvas was covered in shades of gray and blue at first, but in the center, a small yellow sun was beginning to emerge. Mara stood in the doorway, watching, her throat tight. She'd seen this before in Dr. Hale's journal. A child named Thomas, who had painted his grief until it turned into hope. Lily looked up, noticing Mara for the first time. "Do you think broken things can be fixed?" Mara crossed the room and sat beside her, her voice soft. "I think broken things become something new. Not fixed, just different. And sometimes, different is beautiful." Lily studied her for a long moment, then returned to her painting. But Mara saw the faintest hint of a smile. Word spread quickly through Willowmere. The orphanage that had been abandoned for decades was alive again. And the woman who ran it was doing something unusual. Parents brought their children, not the ones who were sick, but the ones who were struggling. The boy who hadn't spoken since his father left. The girl who couldn't sleep because of nightmares. The teenager who'd stopped believing life was worth living. Mara welcomed them all. She didn't prescribe pills or run tests. She listened. She taught them to garden, to paint, to play music, to tell their stories without fear of judgment. And slowly, they began to heal. But not everyone understood. One afternoon, a man in a suit appeared at the door, a representative from the county health department, clipboard in hand, his expression polite but skeptical. "Mrs. Lennox," he said, glancing around the common room where children were scattered, some painting, others reading. "We've received reports that you're operating a rehabilitation facility without proper medical oversight." Mara's chest tightened, but she kept her voice steady. "I'm not practicing medicine. I'm providing a safe space for children to heal emotionally. Everything I do complements their medical treatment. It doesn't replace it." The man frowned. "With all due respect, the state requires documentation, licensing, and qualified staff for facilities like this. Compassion is admirable, but it's not a substitute for credentials." Mara met his gaze. Dr. Iris Hale ran this orphanage for decades without state approval, and she saved more children than most hospitals ever did. "Dr. Hale's facility was shut down," the man said quietly. "For a reason." Mara's jaw tightened. But before she could respond, Lily appeared at her side, slipping her small hand into Mara's. The man looked down at the girl, then at Mara, and something in his expression softened. "I'll give you 2 weeks to get your paperwork in order," he said. "After that, we'll have to make a decision." He left without another word. That night, Mara sat in the common room, exhausted, her head in her hands. Was she crazy for believing this could work? For thinking that love and connection could heal where medicine had failed? The door creaked open, and Sam appeared, carrying a toolbox. "Heard you had a visit from the county," he said, setting the box down. "Figured you could use some company." Mara smiled faintly. "They think I'm running some kind of unregulated operation. They don't understand what we're doing here." Sam sat beside her. Dr. Hale faced the same thing. They didn't understand her either, but she kept going because she knew the children needed her. He paused. "And they need you now." Mara looked around the room at the drawings on the walls, the music box on the shelf, the sunlight streaming through the windows. This place was alive again, and she wasn't going to let it die. If you've followed Mara's story this far, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more stories that remind us that sometimes healing doesn't come from medicine, it comes from meaning. The next morning, Mara was preparing breakfast when she heard a soft voice behind her. "Miss Mara?" She turned to find Lily standing in the hallway, her face pale, her eyes wide. "What is it, sweetheart?" Lily pointed toward the basement door, which stood slightly ajar. "There's someone down there." Mara's blood ran cold. "What do you mean?" "I can feel her," Lily whispered. "She's waiting for you." Mara knelt down, her hands gently gripping Lily's shoulders. "There's no one there, Lily. It's just an old basement." But Lily looked at her with knowing eyes, eyes that seemed far older than a 9-year-old's should be. "Yes, there is," she said quietly. "She wants you to finish what she started." Mara's breath caught. She looked toward the basement door, her heart pounding, and for the first time in months, she felt the same pull she'd felt the night she first opened it. Something was waiting for her down there. Something unfinished. Mara returned to the basement that night, alone. Lily's words echoed in her mind. "She's waiting for you," and though Mara didn't believe in ghosts, she believed in unfinished business. She descended the narrow stairs, her flashlight cutting through the darkness, and sat at Dr. Hale's desk once more. The journal lay where she'd left it, open to the final page. But as Mara ran her fingers along the binding, she noticed something she'd missed before. A loose page, tucked into the back cover, written in different ink, darker, fresher, as if it had been added years after the rest. Mara pulled it free, her hands trembling. The handwriting was the same, but the tone was different. Softer, more intimate. "Mara, if you have come this far, you are ready to let go." Mara's breath caught. The child you lost was not your failure. You loved her with everything you had, and that love did not disappear when she did. It lives on in every child you touch, every life you save, every moment you choose to stay when it would be easier to run. You are not broken. You are a vessel for healing. And this place, this beautiful, wounded place, is proof that love is the only medicine that truly lasts. Mara's vision blurred with tears. She pressed the page against her chest, her body shaking with sobs she'd been holding back for months. Sophie's face flashed in her mind, her small hand in Mara's, her voice asking if the pain would stop. Her last breath so quiet, Mara had almost missed it. And for the first time since that night, Mara let herself grieve. Not with guilt, not with shame, but with love. She cried until there were no tears left, until the weight she'd been carrying finally lifted, leaving her hollow but whole. And when she opened her eyes, the basement felt different. Lighter. as if something that had been waiting had finally been set free. Mara wiped her face and closed the journal carefully. But, as she did, she noticed something else tucked into the back cover, a sealed envelope, yellowed with age. Her name written on the front in Dr. Hale's elegant script. Her hands shook as she opened it. Inside was a single photograph. A baby, wrapped in a white blanket, held by a woman in a white coat. Mara's breath stopped. The baby's face was hers. She recognized the shape of her eyes, the curve of her mouth, even in infancy, and the woman holding her. Mara turned the photograph over. On the back, in Dr. Hale's handwriting, were 3 words: "You were always meant to come home." Mara stared at the photograph until her vision blurred again. She didn't understand how this was possible. She didn't understand the connection between her and Dr. Hale, or why the woman had known so much about her life before it happened. But she understood this. She was meant to be here. She was meant to continue the work. And for the first time since Sophie's death, Mara felt at peace. The next morning, there was a knock at the door. Mara opened it to find 2 people standing on the porch, a woman in her 40s with a clipboard, and a man in a suit with kind eyes and a skeptical expression. "Mrs. Lennox," the woman said. "I'm Dr. Ellen Graves from the County Medical Board. This is Richard Hayes from Child Services. We've received reports about your facility, and we'd like to see what you're doing here." Mara's chest tightened, but she kept her voice steady. "Of course. Come in." She led them through the orphanage, past the common room where children were painting, past the kitchen where Sam was helping a boy bake bread, and down the narrow staircase to the basement. Dr. Graves looked around, her expression unreadable. "This is where you conduct your treatments?" Mara nodded. "This is where Dr. Iris Hale worked for decades. She believed that healing wasn't just about treating symptoms, it was about treating the whole person. Mind, body, and spirit." Richard Hayes frowned. "And you're qualified to do this?" Mara met his gaze. "I'm a pediatric nurse with 15 years of experience. But more than that, I've learned from the children themselves. They don't need me to fix them. They need me to see them, to listen, to believe they're worth saving." Dr. Graves picked up one of the patient files, flipping through it. Art therapy, music therapy, storytelling. She looked up. "Where's the medical intervention?" "It's there," Mara said quietly. "But it's not the only thing. Medicine treats the body. This place heals the soul." Before either of them could respond, the basement door opened, and Lily appeared, her small hand clutching a drawing. She walked straight to Mara and held it up a picture of the orphanage, bathed in golden light, with children holding hands in the garden. "She fixed me without needles," Lily said, looking at Dr. Graves. "She taught me how to be brave again." Dr. Graves stared at the child, then at Mara, her expression softening. Richard Hayes cleared his throat. "Mrs. Lennox, we'll need to review your licensing and documentation." "But," he paused, looking around the basement, at the drawings on the walls, the light streaming through the window, the journal resting open on the desk. "Whatever you're doing here, it's working. Don't stop." Mara's throat tightened. "I don't plan to." After they left, Mara stood alone in the basement, the photograph of herself as a baby still clutched in her hand. She looked at Dr. Hale's portrait on the wall, at the woman's steady, knowing eyes, and she whispered, "Thank you." The basement was silent, but Mara felt, for the first time in her life, that she wasn't alone. She had been guided here by grief, by fate, by a woman who had known, somehow, that Mara would need this place as much as it needed her. And now, she would carry the work forward. Not because she had to, but because she finally understood. Healing wasn't about saving everyone. It was about loving without fear. And that was the only medicine that truly lasted. 5 years later, the orphanage stood bathed in morning light, its windows open to let the spring air flow through the halls. Laughter echoed from the common room, where children sat in a circle, painting the walls with murals of mountains and rivers and skies, so blue they seemed impossible. Mara walked slowly through the corridors, her hands trailing along the wood-paneled walls, feeling the warmth of the place that had once been so cold. She paused in the doorway of the music room, where a teenage girl sat at the piano, her fingers moving gracefully over the keys. Lily, now 15, strong and steady, no longer afraid of hope. She looked up and smiled. "Morning, Miss Mara." Mara smiled back. "Morning, sweetheart." The orphanage was no longer an orphanage. It had become what Dr. Hale had always intended, a sanctuary. A place where children came not because they were abandoned, but because they were broken and needed someone to believe they could heal. Mara had helped dozens of them over the years. Some stayed for months, some for only a few weeks. But all of them left lighter than they'd arrived, carrying with them the knowledge that they were not defined by their pain. In the courtyard, Mara knelt in the garden she'd planted 3 years ago, a small patch of wild flowers and herbs, each one chosen for its healing properties. She'd named it after Dr. Hale. A bronze plaque rested against the garden's edge, engraved with a single line: "Healing is not about erasing pain, it's about learning to carry it with grace." Mara touched the plaque, her fingers tracing the letters, and whispered, "Thank you." The wind rustled through the flowers, carrying the scent of lavender and rosemary, and for a moment, Mara felt as though Dr. Hale were standing beside her, not as a ghost, but as a presence, a quiet assurance that the work would continue. That evening, as the sun began to set, Mara sat on the porch with Dr. Hale's journal resting in her lap. She'd read it so many times the pages were soft with wear, the ink faded in places from her tears. But tonight, she opened it for the last time. Not to read, but to write. She picked up a pen and turned to the final blank page. Her handwriting was steady, her heart calm. "Thank you for showing me that healing isn't about saving everyone. It's about staying, even when it hurts. It's about loving without fear, caring without guarantee, and believing that broken things can become something beautiful. I was lost, but you left breadcrumbs in the dark, and now I am home." Mara Lennox. She closed the journal carefully and set it on the table beside her. The orphanage glowed in the golden light of the setting sun, its windows reflecting the sky like mirrors. And for the first time in years, Mara felt whole. She stood and walked back inside, passing through the main hall where the framed photograph still hung on the wall, the one of Dr. Hale and the children, smiling, alive. Mara paused in front of it, studying the woman's face. And for just a moment, she swore she saw Dr. Hale smile. Outside, the wind whispered through the trees, carrying with it the sound of children's laughter, the hum of a lullaby, the quiet promise of healing that would never end. Mara looked back at the orphanage one last time, its stone walls strong and steady, its windows glowing with warmth. She smiled, and then she walked inside, closing the door gently behind her. She came to heal others, but the place she saved was herself. Because sometimes, the cure isn't found in medicine, it's found in mercy. Healing is not the absence of pain, but the courage to carry it forward with grace. Sometimes, the cure we desperately seek is not found in hospitals or medicine, but in the quiet act of helping others, because in saving them, we discover the parts of ourselves we thought were lost forever. Love, in the end, is the only medicine that truly lasts.